Alrighty, thank you all for coming. I have a nice microphone this time. I usually don't have one. So I'm Summer. I'm the curator here at the museum. Before we get started, everybody please take a second to turn off or silence your phones so we don't have any disruptions. As for announcements, reminder that tomorrow is our annual membership party for museum members. That'll be from 5 to 8. Also tomorrow is the Amelia Island Quilt Guild, their Quilt by the Sea quilt show. Tomorrow is the second day at the Atlantic Rec Center, so if you didn't go today, make sure to check that out. And we'll be having 2 special events coming up in April. On April 8th, we'll be partnering with Old Town to host an Old Town home tour. That's going to be kind of like holiday home tour, so keep your eyes peeled for details about that. And then on April 14th, we'll be having our 20th annual golf tournament. So if you're interested in signing up, we should have rack cards at that back table with information, or you can come by the museum to sign up on Monday. As for upcoming programs, we're going to be having a special program on Tuesday, February 21st at noon. That's this next coming Tuesday. Francis Gary Powers Jr. will be back to speak about his new book, Enemy Territory, the story of the CIA U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers. And then our March Brown Bag Lunch on March 1st will be with Harry Mills, who will be talking about his long family history here in Nassau County, which started in 1752. And then our March 3rd on March 17th will be our next temporary exhibit opening. It's our annual student exhibit in which high school students have the opportunity to curate a museum exhibit from start to finish. This year the exhibit is called Culture for Sale, and it focuses on Nassau County newspaper advertisements from the 19th and 20th centuries. The exhibit will open with a lecture by Dr. Mike Weigold, an advertising professor from UF, who will discuss the history of American print advertising. So that's it for announcements, but tonight we have Buddy Jacobs. Buddy Jacobs moved to Fernandina Beach in 1943, where he has remained a resident. While serving as Nassau County attorney for 13 years, he wrote the first zoning code for the county. He has been general counsel for the state attorneys of Florida for 52 years, representing them in the U.S. and state Supreme Court, district courts of appeal, and the Florida legislature. He was counsel to the trial lawyers section of the Florida Bar for 32 years, representing 7,000 civil trial lawyers in Florida in the state Supreme Court and legislature. He has served as chairman for several groups, including the State Arts Council of Florida, Advocacy Committee of the American Arts Alliance in Washington, and Preservation Institute of Nantucket. He has been the recipient of numerous awards for his work in historic preservation and has lectured throughout the country about restoring towns and cities. So everyone, please welcome Buddy Jacobs.
His family flag was over the island starting in 1817, but just for a brief period of time. But anyway, thank you for being here, Greg. I appreciate it very much. And now you can go back to Scotland. That's Old Lang Syne, and that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about tonight. And I'm not going to sing the song for you because I am a paid singer at the Episcopal Church. I was paid not to sing. And for obvious reasons, nobody ever questioned that part of the church budget. But it's, really a lot about what I've got to say tonight. And it has a lot to do, with some of the words of Old Lang Syne. Those words were written by Robert Burns in 17 1878. He was the poet laureate of Scotland. So there's a lot of Scottish stuff wrapped up in that song. And so should we, forget about our acquaintances, part of what we're talking about there, and never bring them to mind? And should we forget about our acquaintances and never bring them to mind? Should we say in old Lang Syne? Well, Lang Syne means a thing about for goodness sake or for old time's sake. That's what Lang Syne means. And so tonight we're going to walk a little bit back about 50 years and talk about these wonderful people who created what we now have in the restoration and revitalization of our town. We learned in that whole process, and there's sort of a bottom line, a quote again from someone else, and that's from Winston Churchill, who said, "All things are possible when no one takes the credit." Now, he said that back in the 40s, but I got to know Ronald Reagan pretty well and had lunch with him at the White House 8 times. First time I met him, he said in politics in California, the best thing he ever learned was all things are possible when no one takes the credit. And that's really the truth about the restoration of this town. So many people were involved, and so many did so much. We were going to return now to an era whenever we had some real problems. You go back to Fernandina, its original institution of the city of Fernandina, and it was in 1851 that the Florida Railroad came here, and in 1857 they put out the plat for the city of Fernandina Beach, and it was copied after Manhattan, because people thought that because of the rail that's here, and we were 4 miles from the first deep sea buoy, and so we have a great place here that's going to grow like Manhattan. And so that's what they were thinking about at the time they did it. But then some things happened, like 1861, 1862, a thing called a Civil War. And that slowed things down a bit. And as soon as the war was over, though, the town came back, it was revitalized, and things were happening. And if you look at the plat of the city, you will see that there's Center Street, goes east and west, and then you get to Second Street, and Second Street was close to the water, close to the railroad, and so that became the industrial section of Fernandina, and that thrived really well until the first bad fire, which was 1576. And then about 6-7 years later, in 1883, they had another fire. Well, the first fire burned down almost all the industrial complex that had been created on 2nd Street, northern 2nd Street. But then the next, and what the city did, they were very alarmed and upset, so they passed an ordinance. They said, no more wooden buildings down here in the center of this town. You got to build brick buildings, that's what you got to go from now on. But it was a little late, because in 1883, we had another fire. And that fire wiped out a lot of Center Street, and it was very devastating. And then a little bit later, in I want to say 70. And, when you get about my age, that's kind of your era, so you have to kind of keep saying that. But anyway, so a few years later, that's called adapting. A few years later, we had a terrible hurricane that really was a Category 5, and it kind of wiped out Fernandina again. So those were hard times for the city, but they always came back, and it came back to be very vibrant and to grow and to be a prosperous place in which to live. And then we go through into the next century or so or two, and then all of a sudden you're in the 60s. And of course, I moved here in 43. Now, that's not 1843. That's going there. Anyway, it was a nice, peaceful little town. Everybody walked everywhere. You didn't, very few cars around. In fact, I don't think they'd invented cars by the time I was here. So we walked everywhere we went, and you really had a nice little quiet town. But it started having trouble in the 70s. When the 70s rolled, all of a sudden it got everybody's attention when they tore down this wonderful hotel there, the Keystone Hotel, which was built in about 1912. That was a 31-room hotel. I remember in the 8th grade going to a dance there, and they had wonderful marble floors for, wonderful, beautiful place. And yet, it was very active. It had a lot of stuff going on over the years. Samuel Golden, the famous director from Hollywood, actually stayed there one night or 2 nights or 3 nights. And Joey Brown, who was a comedian, he stayed there as well. So those are the kind of people that were there. The food was good, and it was well thought of. But things started happening, and so the economy went down, the tourism went away, we didn't have tourists coming here anymore. The ball teams, we had 2 minor league teams that stayed there, and they quit doing that, and so all of a sudden there's nobody staying at the Keystone Hotel. So that became a real problem. Food Fair bought the hotel, and in 1970 they tore it down. And you could have bought it for $83,000, but it was torn down. And that got everybody's attention. And you say, well, what about the rest of our buildings? What's going to happen to the courthouse and the post office and all these wonderful buildings? What's going to happen to houses? What are we going to do about that? And so several people got involved in that. We go back Chamber of Commerce days. The Chamber of Commerce had some very active people in the historic preservation movement all of a sudden. One of them was Bob Whitaker. Mel was here tonight. And they started looking around and doing things. And then all of a sudden, I moved back here in '72, and I left the University of Florida. I was the youngest dean in the history of the University of Florida. I was the dean of University Relations and Development. Now today I'm known as the oldest everything that you can think of. And in that process, I helped start the foundation down there. So when I moved here, I took the same papers from the University of Florida and created the Amelia and Fernandina Restoration Foundation. And we got that started. Well, we had some people involved in that that just were remarkable people. And I'll talk about them in a minute if I might. Suzanne Hardy was our first president. Now, Suzanne Hardy was a wonderful woman. She was vice president of Standard Marine here. They also had a hardware store on Center Street, which was then called Atlantic Avenue. And she was very interested in historic preservation. I first met her when she taught me Sunday school. And then over time, whenever I graduated from law school, she and her husband, Bill, came down and saw me graduate. They saw me slide across the stage, and the dean went, "Safe, you made it, you made it." So there's always some doubt about that. But anyway, she was very interested in being a part of this. She's a graduate of Wesleyan College and very bright, very nice, and very strong. When Suzanne has her mind made up, that takes care of it. You don't have to worry about anything else. Then we had Helen Littrico. Helen Littrico is an honor graduate, magna cum laude from Duke University. And she was very involved in writing and things like that in her career. And she married a guy named Gino Littrico, whose family was involved in the starting of the shrimp industry here. They made the shrimp industry, like we were the headquarters of the shrimp industry, at least in America, it might even been the world. So they moved back here, and Helen got involved with us in what we were doing then too. We had a fellow named Bob White who had the lumber yard. There are a bunch of townhouses down there now, but on that street. Well, his wife was Mary Agnes White, Now you put Mary Agnes White, Suzanne Hardy, and Helen Lipscomb in the front row of a city commission meeting. You know, we never had a city commissioner ever turn down a city commission in all the years ever turned down anything that we proposed. And without them being so strong behind us, we would not have gotten to where we are today. So the city commission got involved, and in every meeting they had, we have Suzanne Hardy, Mary Agnes White. Mary Agnes always sitting there knitting and things, and they always sat on the front row. And so, but when we went to see them, we always had things done. We didn't have a lot of things to debate about. And so, but those people, Suzanne Hardy and Helen Lipscomb and Mary Agnes White, and Bob White was our first treasurer of the foundation. Now the foundation was a kind of a thing. This is, you know, there's so much energy in the room and so much energy about wanting to get something done about historic preservation. So every time we met. Now Mary Agnes always brought some white wine for everybody, but anyway, we had things that we had to do. Well, the Chamber of Commerce Committee, Bob Whitaker was on that as well. They and Aubrey Williams, who had the Palace Moon here, they really wanted to get things going. So we worked with them, and we raised money to go find a plan and see get things done. Well, part of all these things going on at the same time, we also worked with the Historic American Buildings group, which was a Board of Architecture in Washington. We had the National Park Service involved, and they were going around the country since the 30s recording historic buildings. Well, it just so happens that the fellow in charge of that was F. Blair Reeves, who's a great friend of mine from the University of Florida. And so we convinced him, which didn't take long, to come up here and bring some students. So he brought about 6 or 7 students. They stayed, we put them up for about 3 or 4 days, and they went around and they documented the city, and they were trying to get us ready to be on the historic sites and places. And so they worked out the nomination, they got it done, and so it was a big help to us. We had all that working. We had the Secretary of State at that time, Secretary of State Stone, who later became a U.S. Senator. We knew him. He came over to see us on several occasions. So we had all this working at the same time, but we were also raising some money. And a great book, I hope you all have a copy of it. It's sold out now everywhere. I think Suzanne Tam wrote a wonderful book called Saving Fernandina.
We have 4 copies.
You got 4 copies, all right. Can I hear somebody bid for we had a little competition here. But Gerhard, her husband, let her do it, so we appreciate that. And Suzanne did this without any compensation. She just did it because of her love for the city. She has a tremendous background, worked for the Library of Congress for many, many years, and has held a lot of positions around in Fernandina. So we're very fortunate, very blessed to have her and what she's done in that book. So you might want to read that. But one of the things, these great writing, but also great pictures in there. There's a picture of Bob Whitaker heading the Louis Ferreira at the Florida National Bank, handing him a check for $5,225. Well, that was the merchants' money that they were raising to get the necessary money to get the plans done about the city, some kind of a plan to go forward. And then a fellow named Charles Frazier, who I was knew I was helping a little bit with the plantation get started out there, and he said, "Well, what can they do to help you in historic preservation downtown Fernandina?" I said, "Money." He gave us $5,000, just himself, wrote us a check. And he said, "Oh, by the way, I've got this company of people that are planners, and you might want to get them involved in what you're doing, and I'll get them in here, and they won't charge you." He makes sure of that for the first time. And F. Eugene Smith and a guy named David Brewster. And they came to town and they presented, they did some work in Fernandina first, and then they presented a slideshow to the chamber and other interested people. And now it's been called a lot of things. I remember it being called at the time, Ain't Your Town Ugly, Ain't Your Town Beautiful. And so what they did is they had photographs all down Center Street of the lower part of all the buildings. Then they had all the same buildings in photographs all at the top. And you could see that at the bottom people were doing things that they had to do in the 60s. You know, had all these different kinds of linoleums and awnings and things that were totally out of character with the upper part of that building. So he got everybody's attention, or both of them got everybody's attention that, my golly, you know, why aren't we going back to where that is? So now, after that, we have to pay him some money. So we, to get a plan, because he could do a plan for us. So we raised some money, more money, and then we had a grant that we got from the National Endowment for the Arts. I really was excited about that because at the University of Florida I wrote grants down there, and so we also had Nancy Hanks, who was the head of the National Endowment for the Arts, and she was Helen Mitrico's roommate at Duke. Now, you don't think that had anything to do with anything, do you? $34,000 in round numbers, and we got that money, and then we got and the city agreed to let us do that. See, you can't go get this kind of money unless you got a government behind you. Well, the city agreed to let us go after that grant, so we did, we got it, and then we used that money to do the plan. Now that money is not for any construction. It only can be done for plans. So then we had to start being concerned about, well, if we get the plan and the foundation approved the plan, they loved it, the Chamber of Commerce did it, and everybody in the city liked it, and with our great friend sitting on the front row, the city unanimously approved the plan. So, so that's where we were in that process, but you had to have some money. Now we had a lot of people that we were bringing in from the state and around the country, and a guy named Lawton Childs, he was our U.S. Senator then, and I had him here for a weekend after he won the election for the Senate for the first time. And he was a good friend of mine, but I had another friend named Ferris Bryant, who was our governor, and Ferris had me running his campaign statewide, and so Lawton came to see me one day after he announced late. He said, well, buddy, you know, why aren't you helping me? And I said, well, Lawton, I got to take the girl home I brought to the dance, man. You can't, you don't get out of these things. And so, and after it was over, and he said, well, I got to see you. So he came to Fernandina, and he wanted to tell me something, but he wouldn't tell me for a couple of days. And we got out speaking and did some things, and I showed him all about the historic preservation we're trying to do. And he said, I can help you with that, but I got something for you to help me with. What was that, Senator? He said, I need you to raise some money for a place called Florida House that we were rehabbing a brownstone just off the curtilage of the Capitol. And that's going to be our embassy for people in Florida. So I said, what I get in return? And he says, well, I'm going to help you find some money. So a few months passed, and we got the money raised for Florida House. And so then he comes in and he calls him on the phone. He said, buddy, I found the money. It's called Economic Development Administration. It's just now gotten started. And I'm going to have my staff call you and tell you what the answers are on all the questions asked on the application. Well, and they did. They called me, and we, before it ever even got announced, we were already working on an application. And the team that did the application was Suzanne Hardy, Helen Mitrico, and I'm involved in it as well, and my secretary, Jean Powell. In fact, and we finally, and Helen did a wonderful job putting together the background, and Suzanne was very good about the historic parts of it, and then we had to put it together. Well, we got it together. It took 2 full days and 1 night in between with my secretary and I working together. And the city had authorized that us to go forward. That's another thing they voted for. You were authorized to go get that grant for $3. And after the hours we spent on it, and this is something I shouldn't have done probably, but I did it. I said, what are we just doing $3 for? Why don't we do $6? And so we made that decision, my secretary and I did that night. We're going to go for $6. But there was no real fiscal responsibility for the city. This was not something that's going to cost the city any money. It's just kind of the money you can get. And so we did it, and we got the check and got it back and went to the city commission. And gentlemen, here's the check for $1,353,000. And Ben Sorensen, whom I knew very well, was a great citizen here, a great person. He's the guy that built the Boy Scout hut right by where the tennis courts are now. That hut, he built that by himself and didn't charge anybody any money. He was that kind of guy. But he was real suspicious of me for a while. He said, where did you get the authority? You must be making some money somewhere. And I said, no, Ben, I'm not. He said, well, I'm going to check you out. So for a year, he checked me out to be sure I didn't make any money. But we got $1,353,000. Well, that money was the money that we needed to build, to redo Center Street. And merchants and a lot of people involved in that, there were a lot of concerns, a lot of things that, because we're going to shut down at 2 blocks at a time, and it's going to be like 2 months, all the way going from the water forward to the east. And so there was a lot of concern about it. The merchants really suffered some. But let me tell you, the merchants were really suffering anyway, because we had shopping centers being built on the island. We had about 40% of the fronts of those stores were vacant. There was nobody there. There was nobody there working, because people would go to the shopping centers, because you had a lot more variety, and they wouldn't shop downtown that much anymore. And so all the merchants were suffering. So they went along with us, and they said, okay, we're with you. But it was tough on them, and I appreciate very much the endurance they had to put up with it. But we worked all those years, about 5 or 6 years, to get it all put together. It only took 1 year to build it. So we got it built, and it really, if you look at photographs that you'll see of Fernandina, see how wide Center Street is? That's what it used to be like, so it was just really wide. Now we have a narrow street, and it's a serpentine thing, and a lot of plants and things like that. Well, so merchants were kind of skeptical, but then they went with us, and everything got done. And after we got it done, and over time, things have really worked out pretty well for them. So I don't think anybody regrets what happened during that era and during that period of time. So it's really a kind of a thing that happened back there in that era, when you had everybody cooperating. You had the city government cooperating, you had U.S. senators, you had the Secretary of State, and when we had our dedication, we had a big kind of a trailer out on the waterfront, and we dedicated the revitalization of our city, and we had Charles Frazier there, and I gave Charles Frazier a key to the city. And he said, well, buddy, I've known you well, and if you give me a key to anything, you change the lock, didn't you? That's a true story, by the way, what you know. And I've known Charles over all the years until he passed away in gosh, about 10 years ago, I guess. But anyway, that's kind of, and it was a great celebration, and we've been celebrating ever since. But the thing you really celebrate about it is the cooperation we had with everybody. I mean, it was just a wonderful experience, a lot of energy, and a lot of great people. Bob Whitaker, Mel Whitaker, all the other people that we had just did a fantastic job. Chamber of Commerce stood up and they did what they had to do. And now, there really wasn't any kind of a tourism practice around here, except when Charles Frazier got involved and we started the plantation, and they went through bankruptcy terribly. But anyway, tourism starts to become an industry for us, and it really does protect our city in many ways. It does protect the county in many ways. But it's a pretty good industry to have, and there's no pollutant come out of smokestacks, and things like we used to have here. I mean, people didn't want to come here as tourists because it smelled badly. Not everybody lived here smelled like money, but that was a great concern to them. So, but now we have, which I think is a remarkable place, and the city commission, since we got all that done, they've been good stewards. They have taken care of the city. They've tried very hard. We've had volunteer groups who've helped with flowers and dedications. Lisa is here tonight with Main Street. She's our director of Main Street, and Main Street's very involved now in perpetuation of that, keeping it go forward so the city does well and keeps going. Now you say, well, what do you do now, man? You got something to do. Well, I kind of feel like, we do have other things we can do here. And the Historic Foundation has been revitalized. We've had Adam Kaufman was our chairman for a long time. He's back there behind the bar. He's always behind the bar. We have a great board now. We have Susan Steger on the board. Suzanne Tam's on the board. Susan Steger is the daughter of Suzanne Hardy. And remember, she was on the city commission as well. So we have great people on that foundation. But we have a lot of energy. And what are we going to do with that energy? Well, one thing we are looking at and is having a grant done to expand the old part, more of the old part of the cemetery to be on the National Register of Historic Sites and Places. And if that can be done, then you get more federal money and other monies to restore, and not only restore, but revitalize, if that may sound silly to you, revitalize the cemetery. Of course, I just celebrated the 40th anniversary of my 40th birthday, so I'm not far away from helping out there. But that's one of the things we're working on. My wife Laura is vice president of the foundation, and she's a grants writer, and so she's working with other people on our group to get that done. So things are out there to be done. Be supportive of Main Street, because they are really dedicated to preservation of historic parts of Center Street, but also to the businesses in Fernandina to make sure the businesses are productive, remain productive. In closing, I just want to read you one of my favorite things. I'm going to read this because I don't want to touch my memory because I want to mess it up. But anyway, it's something that I have really found out about in the 60s when a fellow named Kenneth Clark wrote a book called Civilization. It was a PBS show. Some of you are old enough to remember that. And it was, to me, quite stunning. And over the years, I've used this many times in talking to groups like you who are interested in these kind of things, interested in what we can do to take care of each other and of our things we adore and appreciate very much, lifestyle, historic preservation, things like that. And if I might just read it to you. I believe that order is better than chaos, creation better than destruction. I prefer gentleness to violence, forgiveness to vendetta. On the whole, I think that knowledge is preferable to ignorance, and I am sure that human sympathy is more valuable than ideology. I believe that in spite of the recent triumphs of science, men haven't changed much in the last 2,000 years. And in consequence, we must still try to learn from history. History is ourselves. That's something really to remember. History really is us. I also hold one or two beliefs that are more difficult to put shortly. For example, I believe in courtesy, the ritual by which we avoid hurting other people's feelings by satisfying our own egos. And I think we should remember that we are part of a great whole to which, for convenience, we call nature. All living things are brothers and sisters. Above all, I believe in the God-given genius of certain individuals and I value a society that makes their existence possible. So I leave you with those thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate it. Now, I'm told that I can offer any help with any questions you may have.
I got a question.
You're the first guy. All right, man. Go ahead.
The street that you said, Center Street here, in the pictures it was straight and wide. What was the reasoning behind making it narrower and making it curve around? And how did they do that? How did they make it appear that way anyway?
Well, I can tell you they did it. They used bulldozers. But as far as why we did it, the original plan we had, and that's a very good question, the original plan we had was to make it a pedestrian mall. So you would walk down Center Street and cars would not be there. We worked on getting property off Center Street to put cars. One of the things that the foundation did, a great member of that foundation named Eldridge Parton, who had Parton's story for many, many years. His family had it for over 100 years. And he was very active with us in restoring the town. And in that, he and I got together and we said, well, we're going to need some parking. If we're going to have a mall where you walk, we got to have a place for cars. So we got involved in this place, be a place called Bob's Pool Room, which is on the corner of Alachua and 4th Street. And there were several houses in that block. So Elgin and I went around, we reached in our own pockets and we got some money and we put options on all those buildings, including Bob's pool hall. And we took those options to the city because they were thinking too they had to have parking. There was a lot of discussion going about what are we going to do about the library? We're going to put the library because they were going to move it. They didn't know where. It was a big controversy in the city. Some people wanted to stay on 11th Street, and some people wanted to be on Center Street, and this was a site for that, which would have been on the corner of 4th and Alachua Street. So there was a lot of that going on. But what we did, though, in the middle of this process, we got to, and people, the merchants kept saying over and again, wait a minute, where are we going to park cars? Where are we going to park cars? And so we were working this thing on the parking lot, but so everybody kind of got together and they compromised, and we did away with the pedestrian mall. So, but we made the street narrower so it wouldn't be as like zoom, 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 because you get them. I remember whenever you're on Center Street before, which was then called Atlantic Avenue, cars would speed down that road. I mean, they were fast. And so this slowed traffic down, but it also became much more beautiful because we planted trees. We planted saplings. Now you like that, right? That's my tree lady back there. And so I remember we put those trees in the ground. They're about this tall. And now look, they're way up there. I see somebody got old. Was it a tree or me? But, so anyway, that's why we did it, and that was the compromise, to have that serpentine street, as you call it, and then also to make it more beautiful, make it more people-oriented kind of a thing. With benches, we had benches out there, and those benches that you see along the street, we put them out there. So, yes, ma'am, you joined the question.
Well, I'm a planner, so I could kind of answer his question. Because what you did was plant islands for trees and bushes, and what it does is it slows the traffic down because visually, you have to avoid the island which sticks out beyond the cars, and it creates, as you said, with the trees, it's more visually beautiful and it's more appealing to pedestrians. But it does really, like, in the driver's mind, slow things down. They feel like they need to go more slowly because there's because of the trees sticking out and the what they call islands where they plant the trees in. So, and then like the crosswalks and things like that.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it very much. Any other questions?
Tell them why Center Street was built the way it was.
What now?
Tell them why Center Street was originally built the width that it was?
I don't know why. Tell me.
It was built that, at least this is what I was told, and I read it in a couple of history reports. It was built that width in order to be wide enough to turn a two-horse buggy around.
Well, you know,
Buggy wagon thing.
I don't know why I wasn't allowed to see that. Yeah. All right, any other questions from anybody? Yes? Yes, ma'am.
Why was the street renamed, renamed Center Street? Why didn't it retain its name Atlantic?
Well, the original plat in 1857 called it Center Street. And then it was changed, gosh, I don't know the exact year, I think it was like 55 or something like that, to Atlantic Avenue. And then when we got through doing all this stuff with revitalization of the town, the city commission, again, great things they did, they switched it back to Center Street because it's more in keeping with the historic restoration, and it gives it a little more charm because it goes back to the era that we were trying to get back to. Yes, sir.
I just have a comment. Now, if we could just do something with this ridiculous waterfront. It's been 30 years.
You know, sir, it's been longer than that, and you and I need to have a conversation about that. I'm not going to do that tonight. Yes, Suzanne.
Buddy, if I could just kind of build on what Doug asked, the rejuvenation of Center Street was completed basically in a year.
Right.
In 1970, it started in 1977, it was finished in 1978. In the same year, the Shave Bridge connecting the mainland to the island was built. The library was built, and the new hospital. So things can get done when people are willing to work together and understand that they have to pay for things too. And that's been one of the problems that we have on the waterfront, is that every time there's a new election, we have everybody with different ideas and different people lobbying for what they want down there. But I think it's amazing that 1978 was such a banner year in the city and everything that got done.
And it did, because there was great cooperation amongst all the people, amongst the groups, and if we had a problem, we'd sit down and talk about it. We'd try to work it out. And the city commission in that era worked with everybody. It wasn't just this side or that side. I mean, we got the Shea Bridge done. I helped on that too. That was, we couldn't find any money in the state to do the Shea Bridge. And so that was always a drawbridge. And it was a great thing to have a drawbridge on the island, because whenever somebody, it never happened very much, but somebody steals something or shoots somebody, what you do, the Sheriff Youngblood would go out there and he'd raise the bridge. And there was no South End Bridge, so they couldn't get out of here. So that was a thing. So we got that because there was as I remembered, there was some money that the Department of Transportation got from a group or something was going on in Broward County, and they couldn't spend it that year, so we were able to get it over here, and so that's how we got it built. But it's and then we got the legislature named after Tommy Shave, who was just a great lawyer here and a great person in our community for many, many years. You were about the lady back here. Yes, ma'am.
What are the issues the commission must deal with in 2023?
Well, as far as historic preservation is concerned, we haven't given them any that I know about. Now, if you want to talk about everything else, I'm too old to last that long to talk about everything. So, yes, sir.
So, Buddy, you talked about the cooperation. There's always an opposition group. So could you talk a little bit about the people that went, no, we don't want to change?
Well, most everybody, people were willing to talk. Well, why don't you want to change? What do you want to? What would you want us to do? Is there some way we can work it out? And there's conversation, and people can work together the conversation. You don't always get all you want, because we don't have a pedestrian mall downtown. We have a road, well, and that to me is the key, is communication, willingness to talk. Don't walk in the room with your heels dug in, and remember all things are possible when no one tries to take the credit.
Right.
Now, I really have tried to live by that. I've not been perfect at all, but one thing I've learned is I don't want the credit for anything, but I sure don't want the blame either. I don't mind. Anything else? Yes, sir. How you doing, man?
I know, I read Sue Ann's book, and I know, so I have some understanding about why you did this, what the issues were, and the urgency to do it. But I would just love to know what you think of how you walk downtown and see how much people love this city, how much they love downtown, things you had no idea were going to happen. What do you think when you see this? And then finally, too, just to say thank you for doing it.
Well, you're very kind, sir. I would just tell you that every chance I get, I walk down Center Street. You know? And my wife Laura and I, we have lunch whenever I'm in town, and she's available downtown. Anything I can do to go downtown, I do it. In fact, you see me in Jacksonville at a shop somewhere, you're mistaken. I'm not there. So, and that's, to me, it's just a wonderful place in which we find ourselves, and I hope y'all sharing that. But very nice question. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yes, sir. You have a question?
You mentioned.
I am not photogenic, so don't take my picture.
You mentioned the scout hut that's on the island.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the history of that building. Like, how was that decided, that where that spot is, and how they decided to build it?
Well, Ben Sorensen did it, and he became our mayor and the city commissioner. And I don't know how he got it done, but he did it, and he did all the work himself. And he paid for everything himself, the bricks, and not the bricks, but the blocks. It's a block building. So he had ways to do things, I'm sure, that I've never had the privilege of having. But any other questions from anybody? Yes, sir. You told me you're old enough because you remember the 60s. I know.
I do.
Yeah, that's right.
I do.
Yeah.
You were involved, if I understand correctly, with dealing with the post office and the old post office.
Yes.
Can you tell us why the Postal Service would give that back to, or give that to the city, or what the status is of that building?
Let me tell you, we've been working on that for years and years and years, and it's one of my failures. I have a lot of them. That's just one. But they have a thing called the United States Postal Service, which is a quasi-governmental group. It's really controlled to a large degree by the Congress. And there's a lot of politics in there. You remember years ago, whenever they said they wanted, all these millions and millions of dollars because they didn't have the money in their retirement fund to pay their retirement, and they wanted an immediate money, a bunch of money from the Congress to fix that. Well, so they have, upon occasion, about every other year or so, they had a reorg bill of the United States Postal Service. Now they own 32,000 postal buildings, and I haven't checked in the last 2 years. 6,000 of those, I haven't checked in the last 2 years, 6,000 of those are historic sites and buildings. And so we had, thanks to Senator Bill Nelson, who's my close friend for 55 years, he got passed in the Senate in one of those reorg bills to allow Fernandina to step in and take over the building. It's a historic site, and we'd agree to maintain it and restore it. So we had in there 2 different sessions, and the House wouldn't take up the bill about reorganizing the Postal Service. But we have gotten some progress with them, thanks to Bill Nelson's good work. They spent $1.5 million or $6 million on rehabbing it, fixing it a little bit. They fixed the plumbing inside. They've fixed all the windows, and they've done really a nice job of making it look pretty good. But it's just, it's politics, and we just can't seem to get there. But we're still working on it. I work on it all the time, every chance I get. My partner Rich Schultz, who does a lot of our Washington work, he has been working on it all the years too. So, but the town's been supportive. I know Gerhard helped put up one of the wonderful light posts out there, and so you know, people have tried to help there, and we got a problem now. I'm talking to Lisa later. They're not keeping up the shrubbery around the post office, and they need to fix that, and I got a way to do that. Okay, so but anyway, that's the problem. It's so much politics, and but we're not giving up. I'm not giving up, and nobody's asked me to do it. It should be City Hall.
Yeah.
If you've been in the postal, been in and see the courtroom and all, there are 19 offices in there. I mean, it's a wonderful building, and it's really a very important part of our city. And it'd be a great city hall, but that's just my own personal opinion. Nobody's asked me to say that. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Of course, I probably say too many things I shouldn't say. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Buddy. It was great. And thank you all for coming. And we hope to see you at the special program on Tuesday, Gary Powers lecture. Thank you.
That's at 7:30?
At noon.
My native language is Spanish. Then I really want to switch un poquito muy bien. I want to ask about the whole Spanish fountain